Hello everyone and welcome back to our new Scratch video. We've had so far 4 whole lessons on new topics and ideas in Scratch, and we're going to be continuing with that in this video. So let's take a recap of everything we've covered so far. We started off by learning how Scratch was invented and how it came to be what it is known as today. We talked about how you can set up a Scratch environment and start your first project. We covered the basics of motion and even some advanced motion with that. And finally, we discussed events in our last video and how one action can cause a new series of actions to occur, almost triggering it. And so now that all of this has occurred, what are we going to take a look at next? Well, we're going to talk about loops. Loops is something that is used by most programmers, and as you grow more into coding and get deeper into that, you're going to learn a lot more about loops and how you can use it. But for this course, we're going to stick to the basics of it. So a lot of you may not be familiar with what loops are, and that's completely okay. I'm going to introduce you to what that is in this video. So let's get started with that. What are loops? Well, loops are something in code, a statement in code, that allows you to repeat a specific set of actions several times. Now, this may not make sense to you at first, but as I show you examples, you'll learn to understand how this works and what it is. So let's talk about what it is. Now, I say it allows you to repeat a specific set of actions several times, but what does this mean? Well, let's use a really basic example. If you want in Scratch, for example, if you want a sprite to say hello 3 times, you can add 3 blocks after the event tab. So let's say, for instance, we're using the when green flag clicked tab as in our block, as our event. After that, we would add the say hello for 2 seconds, let's say, block, and we would add another say hello block, and after that, another say hello block. So what this will do is, after the green flag is clicked, the Scratch sprite will say hello, and then it will say hello again, and then it will say hello again. Now it's repeating this same action 3 times. Now this is one way to do this, but another way is also to simply add a repeat loop, which means it's something that's going to repeat the action that you give it a certain number of times. You would have it repeat 3 times, and inside the loop, you would put this say hello block. I'll show you guys an image of this and what this looks like later on so you can understand how this works before we start to code with it. Now, you may be wondering, why are loops used? If it performs the same function without the loop, why would we need a loop in the first place? Well, this is because it helps improve the efficiency of your code. In different cases, when you have longer and more repetitive loops of code, not only will it be harder for other people to read and understand your code, but your program may run a lot more slowly. This won't be good when you, in the future, decide to code for some big companies or even try to create big projects. It'll have your project running really slow, and it's just not something you want. Another reason is that it reduces the chance of error. Rather than repeating a statement several times, if you put it in a loop, it means you only have to check that one line of statement for any errors, rather than checking several statements that you've copied and pasted to see where something went wrong. And this could help you debug a lot faster. So let's take a look at different types of loops. Like I said at the beginning, we're just going to cover the basics of loops. So I'm not going to introduce you guys to different types of loops like for or while loops that you're going to learn in other languages like Java or Python, but we're just going to talk about 2 different types, finite loops and infinite loops. So finite loops are loops that are repeated a specific number of times. They have an end. They don't just go on forever and ever without ever essentially ending. So an example of this is saying blink 3 times. You blink, and then you blink, and then you blink again, and then you're done. It's a specified number. Now, whether this number is 3 or 3,000 or 3 million, it is still a specified number. It can be either really short or really long, but this loop has an end. However, we have infinite loops. They continue infinitely. So loops that continue forever and ever, and they just don't end unless the user or the creator of the program wants it to end and manually ends the program. Now, an example of this is saying blink repeatedly. It's an unspecified number. and a person will blink and blink and blink again until someone tells them to stop. So until someone manually ends this or interferes with the loop will run on forever and ever. Now, in some cases, you might want an infinite loop, but for most, you will likely use a finite loop. And this can recur a specific number of times or based on a certain condition, which we'll cover in a later lesson. So let's take a look at examples. Now, there are two images here. Both of them show loops. The image on the left shows a loop integrated into code, not just on its own, whereas the picture on the right just shows the loop itself with no other code around it. Now, let's take a look at the picture on the right first. This loop says repeat 10 times. Repeat 10 essentially just says repeat this following set of actions 10 times. Now you see it forms some sort of bracket almost around the inner blocks, and this just means that all of the content inside of this bracket will be the actions that are repeating, and they will go in order. So what is the sprite going to repeat 10 times? Well, it's going to move 10 steps and then wait half a second. So what this code looks like in a bigger picture is, well, the Scratch sprite will move 10 steps and wait, and move 10 again and wait, and move 10 again and wait, and it will keep doing that until it has done that 10 times. So it's going to move 10 steps 10 times. This essentially means in total it will move 100 steps, but after every 10 steps it will take a break, and it'll move another 10 and take a break, and so on. Now you can change any of these numbers. You can have it move 12 steps or 13, or you can repeat it 10 times or 15 times or as many times as you want. But this is just showing you how loops work in general. Now the picture on the right is integrated with other code. All this means is that when you want your loop to go into effect, you're going to have to make sure that there's an event that triggers it and something that ends it, or something that happens after. Now in this case, we have something repeating 3 times. And inside of the bracket that I've pointed out before, it says say hello for 2 seconds and wait for half a second. So I think I touched on this towards the beginning, but what the Scratch is going to do is say hello and wait, say hello and wait, and then say hello and wait. Then it's going to exit this loop. After it has finished iterating for 3 times, it's going to exit and go to the next block. And this block says stop script, which means it's going to stop the script and the program will be finished running. So all the Scratch sprite is going to do is say hello, say hello, say hello, and then the program will end. So this is just a basic overview of how loops work in Scratch, and now that we've taken a look at all of this, let's see how we can integrate it into our own Scratch game. Alright, so now I have my Scratch environment opened up, and now we can begin to make some changes to our code. So our goal for today is to kind of make this look a little bit more like a game. We're going to be adding in some new things and changing the way our Scratch jumps just to make it more visually appealing. So the first thing we're going to do is start off by actually deleting a lot of the code that we've done so far. So now we are going to delete how the backdrop switches because it's just not really going to serve much purpose in our game. So we can drag it over to the end and get rid of that. And the next thing is this portion. If we play this to just remember what happens, it says good morning and glides forward, glides back, and now we can make a jump. So the portion where it glides forward and back is not going to be really necessary for what we're going to do today. That was just to teach you guys how to get your Scratch sprite to start moving. Now we're going to actually start building some sort of game to help you guys with experience and knowledge just to see what components can be used to actually create a working game. So after it says good morning, we're going to take this new portion of code, just break it off from it there, and drag this over to the end. So now that we've made some drastic changes to our code, what are we going to do next? What are we going to do next? So what we're going to do is we are just going to, first of all, move our sprite a little bit inwards. It's really close to the edge over here, and just by moving it in, it will look a lot more visually appealing. You have to keep several factors in mind when creating a game, even if it's just for yourself. Keeping the game really, I guess, visually appealing and attractive to the eye will help people find it more enjoyable. So now that we've moved it in, let's start off. We can play, and it starts off in the middle. Now all it does right now is just says good morning. There's nothing really big that's happening. So we have it jump like this right now, and it's nice, it's a little choppy, but we can fix that easily. So we're going to add in 2 glide blocks. So we're going to just take this over here. We're going to add in this block, and let's add another one. So these 2 glide blocks, like we mentioned before, they help the scratch just move in a really smooth motion. So we're going to glide for 0.75 seconds. Now, if you're wondering where I got most of these numbers from, it's just a lot of experimenting and seeing what looks best. For purposes of time, I'm just going to tell you the numbers I used. But if you want your Sprite character to have a different effect or look a little bit differently, faster, slower, a lot more direct or indirect or whatever you want, you can play around with the numbers and just change it to however you would like it. So I have it moving to -140 and to -8. So we can just change those numbers, and then it's going to revert back to its original position. So when I moved the scratch a little bit inwards, notice how I used -140. It used to be -188. And I moved the number closer to 0 so the scratch could get closer to the center, if you're wondering how I got that number. So we can just drag this old jump portion to the side. And now let's take a look at what we've created so far. So if we click the green flag, it says good morning, and the jump looks like this. Now, I know it looks really slow, but when we add in other components, trust me, it'll make a lot more sense. So what do we want this game to do? What is this game going to do? Well, for our purposes, we're going to have some sort of ball coming at the sprite, and it's going to have to jump over the ball. Now, later on, we'll learn how to actually code this so that when the ball comes at the sprite, if it touches the ball, the points do not add up. And if it doesn't, then the scratch passed and it gets 1 more point. So we're going to add in a score component, but we'll focus on that later. Right now, let's just focus on getting the ball involved. So we're going to add a sprite. A ball is considered a sprite. Any component you add other than the background is considered to be a sprite. So let's go over here and click add sprite or choose a sprite. And we're just going to search up ball. Now we have this ball. We can click on it to add it to our project. And now that it's here, what are we going to do with it? Well, first I want to change the color. So let's see, how do we edit the color of a ball? Well, here you just go to costumes and you can see all the different colors. We're just going to choose pink for the time being and go back to the code. So what do we want this ball to do? Right now it's kind of just flying up in the air. Well, one thing we want is for it to start off almost off of the screen. So when the game starts, which means when the flag is clicked, so we're going to add this as our event, we want the ball to start off as far out as possible. So we can use a motion block for this and click go to, and then what coordinates are we going to choose? So notice how before we've had, if we move this ball wherever, you can see the coordinates right here, and then once you find a coordinate that you like, you can enter it into these boxes right here. So I'm just going to use the following coordinates because, like I said before, when I'm planning these videos, I make sure to have numbers handy so that for the time being, I can quickly just input them and we can get to the more important parts and understanding the new concepts of Scratch. So we'll use 247, -135. So right now, let's just see where this takes our ball. So if we start, the ball starts almost at the edge of the screen, as far out as it can possibly go. And that's exactly what we want. So now that we have this, what are we going to do next? So the next thing is we want the ball to kind of come at the sprite. So how do we do this? Now, after we have it go to this position, we are going to put in a new block that says glide. This glide block is going to be one of the most common blocks we use for motion just because it gives us a really easy way to control how fast something goes and where it goes. And it's also a really smooth piece of motion. It has a very smooth flow. So we're going to have it glide to the scratches or the sprite's position, which is -140. And we're going to keep the y the same. And this is because the position of each of the components is based on the center of the body. So the scratch's position is based on the center of the scratch's body, which is somewhere around here. Now the center of the ball is significantly lower. So if I put -108, like where the scratch is, then the ball would be kind of floating somewhere up here, so the centers of both align. But we want the ball to be specifically on the ground, so I chose an even lower number than that. Now let's play and see what this does. So if we play, it comes at the scratch. Now that was a little bit fast, so I'm going to change this to 4 seconds. And now let's play again. It comes a lot slower, and if I want, I can jump over. And now here's an issue. It came to the sprite, but it stopped kind of right under it. And we want it to go a little bit past. So we can change this number to -190. Again, just a random number, as long as it's past the sprite. So now let's see this occur. I can jump over when it comes to me, and it goes past. Now here's an issue. We want the ball to kind of disappear after the scratch jumps over it, or even after it passes the sprite. So we can do this by, well, another thing we also want is to have the ball kind of come back again and again. We want it to loop either a specific number of times or infinitely. For now, we're going to put in a specific number of times. And now that we've been talking about loops, let's add this in. So we can go to control. And here we have the two types of loops I talked about. We have repeat blank times and forever, which is the infinite loop. We're going to use a finite loop for this case and add this in. Now we can put 10 for now, and we can kind of just move this actually down. We want this movement block to be inside of the loop because this is the action we want repeated. So we should be done, right? Let's see how this works. All right, it comes at the sprite, I jump. And now, why isn't it doing anything? Well, if you look, the code is still highlighted. It is still in function. Now, it doesn't look like it's doing anything because we aren't resetting the ball's position all the way to the right end of the screen. So we're going to just stop this for now, and we're going to actually add in another component that says go to, and we're going to put this in the loop so that it goes to the new position, it resets, it moves across the screen, and then it repeats that again. So it resets again and moves across the screen, and resets again and moves across the screen. And we want this to keep happening as many times as we say. So I'm going to change this to the same coordinates as before. And yes, so now let's see what happens. And here we have the ball looping in, working exactly as we want it. And the scratch just keeps jumping over it. All right, now here's an issue. We want the scratch to be done saying good morning, and then we want the ball to come at it. So how do we do this? Well, we simply just add one block that says wait blank seconds. Because the sprite says good morning for 2 seconds, we're gonna wait 2 seconds. So now let's see. Actually, we want this wait block to be after the go to block so that the ball can go reset and then it'll wait. So let's start this now. Now you see the ball is already reset. After it says good morning, the ball begins coming and you can keep jumping again and again and again. So we've done this, and now we've managed to make the ball come towards the sprite, so all the sprite has to do is jump. But we want it to look like the sprite is moving, not the ball. Now we can do something more complex where we have the sprite's legs move, but for now we're just going to be adding another component known as clouds. So if we have clouds moving in the background, it'll look like or give the effect that the sprite itself is moving. So let's go and add in some clouds. So I clicked add sprite and then add clouds. So now we are going to have the clouds come into play as well. When the green flag is clicked, and we use this event just because when this green flag is clicked, it's essentially like saying play. So all of these things will go into action when the flag is clicked. So now after the green flag is clicked, what will we do? Well, we want the cloud to only start moving once the ball starts moving towards the sprite. Otherwise, it's just going to keep moving and it's not going to look like the sprite is moving. It'll kind of just look out of place. So we're going to wait 2 seconds for this as well, because the ball doesn't start moving until after 2 seconds. And so the clouds will not start moving until after 2 seconds. Now, the next thing we want is we're going to add a loop to the cloud as well. The cloud is going to go loop in again and again to make it look like instead of the scratch just jumping over the ball again and again, it's running and jumping over the ball. So we're going to add in a loop. Now, we'll change the number for this to 5, and you'll see in a moment why we've done that. The cloud is going to move at a much slower pace than the ball. Now, obviously, if you run, clouds don't move as fast as objects around you, just because that would look a little bit weird and crazy. So the cloud is going to move much slower than the ball, which means it's going to have to repeat less times. Now, let's see, how is the cloud going to move exactly? Now, what it's going to do is it's going to go to a specific position. And this position will be 277 and 120. Again, these numbers I got just by positioning the cloud beforehand and seeing where it looked best. Now, the next thing I'm going to have it do is glide to the other end of the screen. And I said this would be much slower. So if our ball is gliding and it's taking 4 seconds to go from one end to the other, I want our cloud to take even more time. So it's going to take 6 seconds. And where is it going to go? Well, I don't want the Y to move, just the X. So I'm going to have the X become 290, and I'm going to keep the Y at 120. And so now that this is done, we should have a working program, essentially. So I'm just going to move it up here for the time being, just because the first time you run it, it's going to look a little bit in an awkward position. But so we start like this. The cloud begins moving. I jump, and the clouds are just going to keep coming slowly. You can see it's looping through, and it looks almost like our scratch is running and the obstacles are coming at it again and again. So I'm going to stop this. All right, so we've covered a lot of good information. We've covered how loops work and how we can use them in our code. I know this video was a bit longer than most of our other videos, but we got to have a lot of information incorporated, and now you have a pretty much working game. Now we're going to move on to new lectures that teach you how to add new components to your game to make it even cooler, like adding a score or a counter or new things like that. And so I hope you guys enjoyed everything we've covered today. And as always, you guys can contact me if you guys have any questions or concerns about anything I've covered or my videos. And I look forward to seeing you guys in our next video. Have a good day.